It's now my pleasure to introduce our business panel to the stage. Phillip Gomizel and Catherine Cervasio are both business owners who have had extensive experience exporting to China. I would now like to invite Phil and Catherine to the stage. Catherine is the founder and CEO of Aromababy, which is a natural organic skincare company for mothers and babies. Catherine was an early adopter of the China opportunity, commencing export in 2008, with Aromababy being one of the first Australian baby products to be approved for retail sale in China. Phil is the co-founder and managing director of Pipan Foods, a food and beverage manufacturing business that aims to create a full range of healthy food products that kids enjoy and that parents are happy to provide them. Pipan Foods began exporting to China in 2018. Welcome, Phil and Catherine.
Thanks, Gaby. My hand put it. Sorry. Does the projector need to be on? Yeah, I am. Sorry to be a pain in your eyes.
Without further ado, I'd like to begin by asking you both to tell us a little bit about your business, when you first started exporting to China, and what prompted you to go into the market. Catherine, I might begin with you.
Sure. Well, I founded Aromababy in 1994, basically had a little bit of background in developing product in retail, mostly fashion, and then with my first baby, decided to look at the baby care market. And at that time, there was no products at all that had natural and organic. It was all chemical-based and similar formulations. I also found a link between eczema and dermatitis and the ingredients. So fast track a couple of years, we ended up exporting to the Middle East, got into some department stores here and pharmacy. This was before e-commerce, before a China opportunity existed. But then 2005, I think we were approached by a gentleman in China who was involved in the health sector, and he had a personal interest. So he was, his wife was expecting their first baby, and he was also looking for a business interest as a side project, I suppose, to diversify what he was doing. So he had scoured the world for the best baby skincare products, and at the time we were the only natural organic, a couple of emerging brands, but we'd already been around for around 10 years at that time, 8 years. So we kind of began exporting in a reactive fashion, and it certainly wasn't something that I researched and thought, oh, I'm going to export to China. That looks like a massive opportunity. And we had, quite strong existing business here. So the reason, I suppose, was taking advantage of an opportunity that came up, and in looking at the market and the size of the births compared to Australia. I think it was like 12 or 13 million compared to our 250,000 per annum at the time, which you only need a very small percentage to test the market. And that's pretty much how we started.
Wow, that's so interesting and just amazing to hear about. Obviously, we all know the size of China, but for you to just go ahead and take that opportunity. Phil, if you could give us a bit of introduction about Pipan Foods and when you started exporting to China.
Yeah, okay. So we actually set up Pipan with a specific purpose to build a brand and product for the Chinese market. My background was in infant formula. I'd worked as a commodity trader for a number of years. Through the dairy boom to China, through the infant formula boom to China, we saw a lot of product, a lot of Australian, New Zealand product moving into China. Then became the general manager of one of Australia's largest infant formula manufacturers. And through the infant formula boom, a number of very wealthy people come in, and we had this wall in the factory called the Wall of Death. It was brands that would come in and they'd put $250,000 down, and they'd slap a cartoon kangaroo and a cartoon koala on an infant formula can, and they'd say, everyone thought it was white gold. We're going to take this and it's going to be massive. We're going to be doing 6 million cans a year, and then they'd never come back. In one order, they'd invariably lose a heap of money, and they'd not come back. And we started advising brands, myself and my colleagues, you need to diversify Chinese consumers. They're not these dumb consumers that you think they are. They're not just going to buy anything because it's from Australia. They're a sophisticated, well-researched consumer. no one was listening. So myself and a couple of my colleagues thought, well, rather than advising everyone, why don't we do it ourselves? Why don't we put our money where our mouth is, and let's start to create a product from the ground up for the Chinese market. And through that time, regulation, the Chinese market is forever changing. And one of the ways they forever change the market is through regulation. So it used to be anyone could send anything, any form of infant formula back to China, and the Chinese government kept tightening up those regulations. So we started to look for less regulated markets, still within the mother baby sector. We started to look at what's trending nutritionally, what ingredients should we work with, what colors, what designs, the biophilia, the products, the styling. And we built a product from the ground up, and we started trading with China. We first went there in 2018, and by early 2019, we had done our first container.
Wow, that's interesting that you both have really specialized your products for the Chinese market. China is such a fast evolving consumer market. How have you gone about keeping pace with those changing consumer trends and ensuring a good product fit for the market? Catherine, I might start with you.
I mean, for us, I suppose, because we were such early entrants in the space, they were really hungry for products that were safe, that had been in the market elsewhere for a long time, maybe a little bit different, but some similarities as well with other categories, in that mothers don't just want to buy a new product or a new brand. They really want to be able to research it and look back. They want the heritage. For my particular category, they also loved the fact that there was a female, a mother, and it was her own product. So I think those kind of things made us more acceptable in the market. The fact that I've got some health professional qualifications and was able to be on the ground and actually share knowledge, and I guess participate in events where it's not just about a transaction and selling a commodity and getting money. Mine was much more of an emotional purchase and therefore an emotional entry to the market, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. That relationship piece is so important, and that investment of time in the market. I know you spend a lot of time over in China doing that. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of relationships for building of relationships in the China market to succeed there?
Well, again, I think, being on the ground has been crucial. Building the relationships with your distributors and also key stakeholders like maternity colleges in my category, store owners. And store owners might own 5,000 stores, or they might own 50 stores, but each one of them is incredibly important. And in fact, some of those relationships that we made 10 or 12 years ago, they exist today. And the current distributor that we have came about as a result of a store owner reaching out and saying, we've got mothers that are asking for this brand. Can you please find a distributor to get it back into the market? So this all happened during COVID. And I suppose that's an example of the power and the strength of building those relationships.
Definitely. And for Phil, have you found those identifying the right partners to be sort of a key success factor for your business?
Yeah, that's absolutely a key success factor. In terms you questioned about staying on trend, we haven't managed to keep up. We're currently not doing anything in China. We had a key partner. So we identified early on what we're good at and what we're not good at. What we're not good at is the marketing and sales within China. So we set about trying to find an invested partner, as Rob had on his slides, and back and forth to China at exhibitions. We met with countless businesses. We created a great product, so we were being courted for the market because people saw the potential. And we signed a distributor. And then through that time, we saw the landscape changing, and we didn't want to play in that space. We wanted an invested partner who knew that part of the market to handle that for us so we could focus on manufacturing. Unfortunately, through COVID, the partner that we eventually chose, his business didn't survive. And that was midway through 2020. And we haven't been able to replace him as an on-the-ground distributor. We then tried to put the product onto Tmall because that's what we were advised to do. That seems what everyone was doing. And then we fell in a trap of playing in a space where we weren't subject matter experts. And it is a slippery slope. It's a very expensive playing field. We spent a lot of money for not much reward. And then earlier this year, we decided, okay, we need to step back from this. We need to go back to what we originally planned of finding that invested partner. But it's a bit hard at the moment with travel and whatnot to find that. So to answer your question, it's the most important part.
Definitely. And just because you mentioned Tmall, it'd be interesting to hear from you both about how you went about thinking about which sales channels to go on and how, whether that was general trade or e-commerce. Catherine, how have your channel mix changed over the time that you've been in China?
Well, obviously there was no Tmall, there was no TikTok, there was no Redbook, etc. And there's many others that have been in Australia and retreated in the last couple of years. Some COVID related and some not. I think it's just the market's changed. But really we were led by the distributor. So choosing a good partner who is invested and not only in time and marketing, but also financially, because you can imagine with a 20-odd-year-old brand, I've spent millions of dollars in developing the brand, the marketing, the know-how, the intellectual property, and having it all protected. So their investment is then in setting up some channels, and that includes Tmall. So as an SME in Australia, I always found some of these e-commerce platforms were terribly expensive to launch on if you also had interests in, like we work with Korea, Singapore, Middle East. So how much money and time do you then put into China? And it's almost like you're setting up a new business by setting up an online platform. So we ended up making the decision around that along with our distributor, who now, of course, it needs to be omni-channel. It needs to be in stores. It needs to be shoppable, but that's not our part of the investment. That's the distributor's investment. It's changed a lot. You know, we've had to pass over our official WeChat. You know, there's a risk in how much do you pass over? You know, you're actually giving away some control. But at the end of the day, if you want to succeed and you have the right partners, then you need to relinquish some of that control and have some trust. And that trust goes a lot to building the relationship and making it even stronger.
Definitely. So it seems that choosing that correct distributor is just vital for your business's success. And I'm interested to hear from you both about how you went about marketing your products and building brand. I might start with you, Phil.
So originally the plan for us was a bricks and mortar approach. And in early 2020, we had our distributor. We were meeting with retailers. A big part of doing business in China is to go and meet the people on the ground. So it was January 2020. We had this big dinner where we took out a massive retailer and we all drank too much and celebrated. When I got back on a plane to Melbourne, and it was only about a week later before everything started to shut down. But that was our original approach. In terms of marketing, we wanted the more traditional approach of the seller in the store who is incentivized to talk through your products. We'd created a different product. There was no like-for-like offering within market. So we wanted that face-to-face contact to help with customer conversion. When we eventually put the product online, that educational piece of a new product in a new market, it was not what people were familiar with, was quite a struggle. And that's why we didn't get the ROI that had been promised to us through online sales.
Catherine, you mentioned some of these newer channels that are emerging, like Little Red Book, and obviously WeChat's been around now for decades, but how do you go about using those channels to help promote your brand and products in the market?
Sure. Well, I think Nick, wherever you are, you mentioned the other day, he saw that I've got my own channel on WeChat. And I think that's part of it, actually, immersing yourself in some of these channels. And it doesn't suit everybody, but if you can be the spokesperson for your brand, then be the spokesperson. In terms of WeChat, we actually used WeChat to sign the biggest contract we've ever signed during COVID. So I was insistent on being able to see my team. I wanted them to get to know me. I wanted them to understand the passion and the expertise that went along with the brand, not just looking at an opportunity. We know Aromababy, we want it. It doesn't have a distributor at the moment. I really wanted them to feel the connection. And in fact, we were working from home. I was working from home, and we had to have a witness for the contract, and my son was home. So my son, who's over 18, had to come down on the WeChat and said hi to the distributors and our intermediary and was the witness for the contract. And I think those sort of things, you know, that's the way they do business. And it was the way we used WeChat to insist on the face-to-face in a virtual sense connections and getting to know each other, see each other smile. Those things are really important. In terms of, Red Book, again, I've got my own account. We didn't do anything on that. We didn't use influencer marketing. It was about me being on the ground and educating at conferences and meeting with mothers, meeting with midwives and building those connections. And they in turn become your mouthpiece and your advocates.
That's fantastic. And Phil, for Pipan Foods, did you use influencers? And
Yeah, we spent a lot of money on things I didn't really understand. I don't speak Chinese or read it, so I was just trusting that we were doing the right thing. And some of it you can see, like with the content we had for LRB, the quality of photos and videos and stuff, it was very high quality. So the brand building aspect was strong, and I was proud of that. But then when we were on Tmall and we went into the Alibaba ecosystem, there was a lot that we just didn't understand as a team. And some of my co-founders are of Chinese descent. But getting to the bottom of it and understanding what we were spending money on and what we were getting back, it all became a bit grey. And that's where I think you need a partner. You need a partner who's on ground, who understands what you're getting into, because I didn't realize at the time, but we were getting incredible numbers of reviews and people raving about the product and sales. We were doing huge volumes per month. And I thought, fantastic, we're away here. Margins are great. I'm going to be rich. But we were effectively paying for these reviews. The company, we had a TP that was representing us, and then they had outsourced another aspect, and we were losing control of what was going on. And the company down the path who was organising the sales was just really buying the product and then paying people to review. And the moment we turned off that tap, the sales turned off. So, we went from doing 50,000 units in a month to 800. And we had all these fantastic reviews, and we were like, where are all these loyal customers gone? And then Alibaba said, because you can't talk through the system, you can't directly contact your customer, you don't know who they are. And Alibaba said, well, if you want to bring in a loyalty program, you can buy an annual subscription for $12,000. So we did that, and then it didn't work. I was throwing money away because we didn't understand what we were operating in. Whereas, we understand the digital market here in Australia. You can email, you can talk to your consumers, you can bring up that loyalty. But we were in a playing field where we didn't know what we were doing.
So do either of you have any tips for businesses on how they can go about building those capabilities and that understanding of the China market? Did you approach different government trade agencies or any other support just to help build your internal team's capacity to succeed in China?
Well, our internal team was like 5 people, including a Chinese-speaking student at the time. And really, we went down to a 2-person team post-COVID. So I think, it's not really about the size of the team and the capability. It's about that partner relationship and the strength of the partner, the expertise, because like with yourself, Phil, people come knocking. There's no shortage of people wanting to distribute a product. So you've got to be really selective in how you choose the right partner for you. Have they distributed baby care before? Have they been through the registration process? Are they familiar with running a Tmall store professionally? Some brands are very traditional and have only been in retail and don't know how to run an effective Tmall marketing strategy. So maybe that's not the right partner given the current landscape. But I mean, my tips would be around intellectual property, because there's a lot of entrepreneurial mindset as there is in lots of countries, but certainly in China, where people would secure a name that they think is good or that's available in Australia with the hope of perhaps one day getting the distribution rights for it and never getting it. And the name's just stuck there, which you cannot use. So they would be my things: getting the correct Chinese name that translates well, registering all the IP, including WeChat handles and websites with, domain name extensions and that are Chinese specific.
I think, protecting against IP infringement, having that already before you go to market is critical. Phil, did you have any other thoughts on, you said your team lacked that understanding, but how you might do it if you went back to the market?
I think what Gaby wants me to say is that the digital academy that Asialink. No, that's where Catherine and I met, actually. Yeah. We were part of round 1, and it was fantastic. Andy Jiang, who runs it, is He's an amazing man. He ended up getting involved with our business, coming on as a mentor and as an advisor and as a friend. We were already operating in China, but it was COVID and we had time. And I said to my staff, look, there's a free course, or, you know, I can't remember if it was free, it might have been paid for, I don't remember, but we did it. And it became, honestly, it was the most enjoyable part of the week, because Andy calls out people, he makes you speak, he makes you respond, and you learn. So if anyone, I've heard it's going around again, so if anyone's considering it, I highly recommend it. My wife did it when she was on maternity leave. She's our accountant for the business. But she did it and she got to really learn a lot about the market. And that helped us tweak the strategy. Where we fell over was we grew too big too quickly. I think when you're playing around with China and learning about the market, and the e-commerce providers or platforms are getting better now at allowing you to dip your toe in the water. When I first started the business, I think it was a 250,000 Australian dollar deposit you needed to put on for a flagship Tmall store. They brought that down to 15,000, somewhere around there. Now they let you run mini stores. You can have product in the Sydney warehouse. That gives you some exposure. That gives you a chance to test your marketing. The conventional marketing approach was to pay a marketing company, you know, $50,000, and they would sit down with panels and groups, and you would learn about how to, you know, talk about your product within market. If you've got the funds for it, that's still a good way to go, because it saves you time once you are in market. When we first launched on Tmall, we started very slowly and almost quietly, just testing different things and getting that data back. Once we found something would work, we started ramping it, but we ramped too big, too fast, and couldn't maintain. Once you're spending, you know, $500,000 a month, it's very hard to peg back from that. And once you start competing in that space, big companies start noticing that you're in that space, and they've got deeper pockets. We started having the likes of Swiss buying our brand name. So if someone went onto Tmall and typed it, Swiss products would cover the page. And it's very predatory in that response. These weren't things we were aware of before we got into it. So go slow would be my advice.
That's some great advice, and it's great to see the evolution of those e-commerce platforms giving smaller, medium-sized businesses more options when they're testing the market. I think we'll move now to Q&A. We'll take both questions from the room and also online. So I might start with some questions in the room if anyone has any questions for our panelists. Yes, Jason.
Hi. Jason Fitz from Global Victoria. Okay, and thanks very much for the presentation. That was really interesting. I am interested in, you know, once the COVID restrictions ease up a bit, the sorts of in-person bricks and mortar type engagement that we could do in Beijing or Shanghai or any of the other cities before COVID. What sorts of things will you make a big impact when you are there? And I'll just put a little bit of advertising, if I may, here, that the Victorian government, Global Victoria, has a big house in Shanghai, which is a permanent trade show for Victorian products. So there's part of the answer.
Yeah, well, we did Cial with Global Victoria in 2019, and working with Global Victoria, I think this is a privilege as a Victorian business. It legitimizes your offering, you're part of a bigger stall. So Global Victoria ran an expo in 2019. I think it's going ahead next year. There's plans for international businesses, so we'll be there next year. You know, you've got the government support. People in China see you as a legitimate business. They don't think you're a front for something else. So you cover that first part of the trust building. And plus it's funded by Global Victoria, the actual stand. You just have to pay to get yourself there. So as a small business, that's a great way to get presentation within the market. And Global Victoria runs it. We were just in Singapore last month. We're going to Vietnam next month. We've diversified our business we were heavily into fortified milk products for kids. Now we're into snacks. We made an investment into Country Victoria, into a manufacturing facility. I think Southeast Asia and China are still great markets. Selling snacks is much easier than selling expensive milk. So we're going to continue on. but yeah, I think you wanted a plug for Global Victoria, didn't you? I've done that justice. Yeah, yeah.
And we would also say to attend some of those beauty expos in person. There's a mother and baby expo in the middle of the year. Our new partners actually invested in that. It's the biggest stand I've ever seen from a small brand perspective. So it was certainly on par with some of the major players in China. So to see our brand with this beautiful, large professional stand gave me a really good indication of the kind of effort and commitment that the distributors were making, and they put their money where their mouths is. So I would be getting back on the ground over there, reconnecting with our maternity friends, participating in expos. And I actually did the inaugural women's trade mission to China a couple of years ago through Global Victoria. And even though I've been exporting for 20 years and 10 in China, the connections and the new eyes on the market and the intel that I got from participating was, invaluable. You couldn't have got that just by working on your own, trudging around, catching planes and trains. So it was fantastic.
Yeah, can I just add to that? It is the small community, the export community, and you very quickly learn most of the players within it, whether it be the business owners or the sales staff. And then that's the quickest way to find distributors for new markets, because people swap, they'll make introductions on your behalf. I met a company, Slim Secrets, a few years back on a trade mission. Then they introduced me to their Singaporean distributor, and then we started doing business in Singapore, who then connected me through to Japan. Other Australian businesses are very willing to help Australian businesses in the export sector. So by getting out there and getting involved, you can grow your business quite quickly just through networking. And
Slim Secrets just had a really great exit after all that success, which is wonderful, wonderful story.
It's great to hear about that community and all of those avenues of support that are available for SMEs. Are there any other questions in the room? I might go to this gentleman over here.
Hello, my name is Leo, and I'm an international student studying at La Trobe, doing my postgraduate major in international relations. The reason I want to ask the question is, I feel like the dodgy situation, Phil, you mentioned before. If you have someone like have a Chinese background, I think it's probably going to be easily to avoid. And I just wondering because I felt like I was told like from the political side was a little bit slow in terms of the progress. So they said like probably you should think about the Australian-China relation. I was taught to maybe more from business side. So I was thinking to ask, do you think that international students, the people who probably have the Chinese background, do you think that can play a role in the small, medium enterprise?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we two of my co-founders have Chinese backgrounds. And they were great for looking at things from a consumer perspective. You need people with experience. So specifically with the Tmall and Alibaba ecosystem, you need people with experience in that. And that's where my guys, they didn't really get it. Plus, we had 4 dads I was in my 30s, and we were trying to sell products to Chinese mums. We probably needed to add some females to the group, and Chinese females specifically. But that's what we were paying a marketing company for, to get that messaging. It was more once the different mechanisms of spend started coming through that we didn't have the background. There's many different ways you can spend money on Tmall. It's not just I'm paying for advertising. There's specific types of advertising, and that's where we got lost completely. So I recommend if you're going to add someone. And there are a lot of international students. We're doing work with the university in Sydney that was helping with some of our marketing brief work, and that was all free. The students were writing all these marketing briefs for different approaches, but it was that we needed someone within our team who actually understood those mechanisms for spend within the marketing on that platform. And that's where things got a bit out of control, because you've got to pay for your keyword searches. You've got to pay for your positioning on the web page where your product comes up. There's different banners where your product can appear. There's different promotion events where you can spend a lot of money very quickly. They give you real-time data. It's a very sophisticated system. You can see what's working and what's not working, but you get a lot of responses about what's not working.
And can I just add to that too? As I mentioned earlier, we had a Chinese student. Sometimes if you choose somebody who doesn't have the business acumen, then they might see it with a different perspective. My staff member was fantastic and had journalism backgrounds, but she was young. She didn't have business understanding and she wasn't a mother, she wasn't a parent. So, you know, that always doesn't work if it's not the right person. And the other thing I would say about cultural differences, I did immerse myself in the community, in the market, and I learnt a bit of Chinese. I went to study. I read about it. And I think, you know, if you can understand a little bit of the culture yourself, and I'll just say, 我的中文不好, but if you can say it, sometimes it's just an icebreaker just by saying, well, actually, my Chinese is really bad. But it can make somebody feel more at home, and there's an acceptance of the cultural differences. So I would also say that, you know, that's up to us to explore the cultural differences and accept them and immerse ourselves in them a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got a question here from online, and they say, as an SME new to the China market, which platform or platforms would be the most suitable for them? And they've, you know, Tmall, WeChat, etc.
I would say, what are they
that?
selling?
Yeah.
What are they selling?
And they're selling it too.
Yeah.
For your businesses, have you found particular platforms to be more successful?
I think it's difficult to stand out in
Yeah.
Tmall. Tmall's you know, it's like the most bigger, it's like an Amazon. So how do you we sell on Amazon, but how do you stand out on Amazon? So I think there's a lot of questions before you would be asking that kind of thing, because it really depends on what you're selling, what your strategy is. Are you doing just the big cities? Are you looking at like maybe 3rd and 4th tier cities? Where's your consumer? Where's the customer? And that's something that whoever that is, I mean, if they go and understand all that, or if they already do, then you'll be able to extract some more information around what's the best platform. It's not always the biggest is the best. It might be like a really great niche one for fashion, or it depends what the commodity is.
Definitely. China is such a deep channel ecosystem. We have another question here online, which is, can you speak to your thinking on exclusive contracts in China and how you went about navigating exclusivity requests by partners?
Yeah, I'm always happy with markets to go for an exclusive partner. And then, you know, you can put a time limit on it, you can review it. It's difficult to manage multiple distributors within a market. And even if you try and break it down regionally, it leads to infighting, inevitably, price wars, and it can really hurt your brand. And we saw some big Australian companies fall into that trap of having too many people sell products within a market. It devalues the brand because distributors are always trying to drop the price in order to get their volume through. So yeah, in terms of finding the right partner, I prefer to go on ground, see what they have, see what facilities they have, see what other brands they're working with, talk to the retailers that they're selling to. We haven't been able to do a lot of that, obviously, but my advice is get yourself on the ground and meet the people who you're considering working with.
Catherine, do you have any thoughts on that question?
I totally agree. And even with e-commerce, if you're on 4 platforms, then who's ever managing that business will be invariably trying to undercut the other on price. And we have seen, you know, stories of Australian brands that have been damaged by price cutting and, you know, price wars online on the different platforms. And we've both dumped stock. We talked about that before. Yeah. We both had stock over there to sell online that in the end couldn't be sold. We have expiry dates, and I'm guessing you do too.
Yeah.
So it's not even worth bringing it back. So, I mean, there's a lot of risk with sending stock over and not being sure of if it's going to be sold within the time frame.
Definitely. I might bring it back to the room if there are any other questions. The gentleman in the back.
Hi, thanks for the insights. I'm Daniel Watts. I'm Managing Director of Thames and Hudson Australia. We're a publishing company. I've been exporting books to China for over 20 years. I first entered that market in 2000. One of the additional layers of complexity book publishers have to deal with, which we haven't touched on today, is that of censorship. So, and that's becoming increasingly sensitive in China at the moment. Just the mere mention of the 3 Ts, Tiananmen, Tibet and Taiwan, is enough to have a book banned from being sold in China. So one of the ways we circumvent that problem is to license books so they can be edited and censored before they're published in the Chinese market, as opposed to exporting. So I wonder what views you have on licensing in China, and what do you think maybe the pros and cons are from your experiences?
It's interesting that you say that, because I've just written a training manual for our distributor, and they asked me just to write it in the actual way that I would like the products to be used and regarded, and they would edit it to suit the market appropriately. So I think, you know, that's an example of what you're saying. We're basically licensing the information through this relationship so that they can modify it within the confines of the contract, and, you know, meet the regulatory guidelines.
And in food, it's a bit harder because it's the origin story of where it comes from. So we were selling a dairy product that was from Australia, and Chinese consumers were paying a lot of attention to that origin story. Where is this dairy product come from? We did a project, so we were buying, our secondary packaging was coming from China. It was this tube that was printed up. It was much cheaper to bring it in, but you know, you're sending air on containers of air coming back, and then we're finishing the packaging here and sending it back to China. We ran a study to see, well, what if we finished the product in China? We just sent the primary packaging, you know, boxes of thousands of sachets, and we finished the packaging in China. It still stays a product of Australia. And we found that the response from consumers would be, no, if it's finished in China, it's a Chinese product, and we're only going to pay a price if it's come from Australia.
And we had the same feedback. So there was an option to send bulk product and have it finished, which would have eliminated some of the barriers. But our feedback was also that it needs to be completely 100% Australian, and we have Australian packaging as well. So it just seemed not worth it.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any other questions in the room? I think there was one at the back row.
Actually, to pick up on that point that you made, that both of you just made about the importance of the Australian label. In some of our research, I'm David, I'm from Asialink Business. In some of our research, we're seeing that domestic brands are producing products of much higher quality, and there's a suggestion that the Chinese market is more accepting of locally produced goods in some of these markets. What's your impression in both of your experience over the past few years in terms of maybe some pressures that you've come under from domestic brands?
Yeah, well, some of the, I think Bubs, the big Australian infant formula company, they signed an agreement recently to start manufacturing their brand locally in China. There's been a big push from the government for Chinese consumers to consume more domestically made product. And, you know, if you look at the younger generations who have just seen, you know, growth year on year, why would they doubt Chinese origin products? So, you know, that national consumption, whereas it used to be everything had to be imported, a lot more domestically made products are being consumed. From my perspective, we'd have to be a much bigger company and a much more well-known brand to be able to license and get our brand locally made. We looked at potentially making an Australian product that was all done in Chinese language. So we could say to Chinese people, this is an Australian made product made for the Chinese market. I didn't have the guts to go down that path, but I think that's also worth looking at. Australian businesses need to understand you're in a different market, tailor your product for that market, and be creative with how you go about it. It's still something I'd love to do, have a fully Australian made product made completely in Chinese for that market. Because you find that, you know, a lot of people can't read English. So if you send a product there that's covered with English, they don't know what they're looking at. And then you only have the space on the white sticker on the back. And this is in food for them to understand. So all of your marketing is going to waste through your label. So I think that would be a brave step for companies to take. But yeah, to your point, yes, domestic product is a big threat for imported goods.
Mm. And likewise, there's a growing market in natural and organic in China, as there is around the world. So you're no longer just the only natural brand on the shelf or online. There is a difference, I think, still between what's regarded as natural organic in China and what's actually natural organic. But that's just around education. And I hope that, you know, through the work that we do, it helps people understand what they're buying and what they're paying for. But there's definitely like a growing range of things being available on the shelves in China by Chinese companies who are doing very, very good quality product.
And I'll just add to that, it's not just the domestic market. I mean, the whole world is in China, you know, and years back, Australian made squeeze pouches for baby food was a really hot selling item. And now you go there and it's just dominated by Ukrainian product. And now that's seen as a clean, green market, significantly cheaper than Australian. You can't just go there and think, oh, I'm an Australian company. I've got a good quality product. I can charge a premium for it. Yeah, there's a lot of competition there.
And the thing is too, if your product's not premium here, it can't be premium there. It needs to be traceable. It needs to be what it stands for here. It needs to be what it stands for there. So you need to decide, what market are you playing in? What are you, a mid-level brand? Are you a mass market brand, or are you a premium product? And how can you demonstrate that?
I think that's a really interesting point to leave us on. It's just important to really understand what your brand is trying to achieve in the market and how you want to position yourself and price your products accordingly. So that we've had some really great questions. That ends our Q&A section of today's launch. Catherine and Phil, thank you so much for sharing your insights and lessons with us. That's been really helpful. I thought this was a fascinating discussion. I also wanted to thank Peter Tsai and Lee Howard for their remarks. And for everyone who joined us and engaged with the conversation today by asking questions. With this, we're coming to the close of this launch. If you're interested in learning more about Asialink Business or the Foundation, please see our websites. The report is also available on the Asialink Business website and will be shared with all participants via email. We'll also be sending out a survey, which will take a few minutes, and ask for your feedback on this event so we can continue to improve our events. Thank you very much again to our panelists and our speakers today, and for everyone for joining both here and online to this launch. This now ends the formal part of our launch. Thank you all for joining.